The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of New Seoul Colony. Children ran between the metal buildings while their parents prepared for another day of work in the mines. The settlement sat in a valley surrounded by purple hills, on the planet HFY. 3,000 humans called this place home. Minho kicked a small rock as he walked toward the old water tower, where his friends waited. At 8 years old, he was the youngest of their group, but his curiosity made up for his size. He loved collecting the strange colored stones his father brought back from the deep mines. His pockets always jingled with new specimens. Jiwoo sat under the tower drawing pictures in the red dirt with a stick. She was 7 and had the biggest imagination of all the children in the colony. She could turn any ordinary day into an adventure story. Today she was drawing the flying creatures that lived in the purple grass beyond the settlement. The sound of running feet announced the arrival of the twins Do-hyun and Do-young. Both were 9 and impossible to tell apart, except for a small scar on Do-hyun's chin from when they tried to build wings last summer. They were always planning some new prank or crazy scheme that usually ended with them being chased by angry adults. Hyeji arrived last carrying a backpack full of supplies she had gathered from around the colony. At 10 she was the oldest and naturally took charge of their group. She had learned basic first aid from the colony doctor and always made sure everyone stayed safe during their explorations. The 5 children had become inseparable over the past year. While their parents worked long hours in the mineral extraction sites, the kids explored every corner of their small world. They knew which buildings were empty, which paths led to the best climbing rocks, and where the sweetest fruit grew, on the strange trees near the river. New Seoul was peaceful in the way that frontier settlements could be when they were far from trouble. The nearest Earth military base was 6 months' travel by ship. The Galactic Council had promised this sector was safe from pirates and hostile aliens. Most families had come here seeking a quiet life away from the crowded cities of older human worlds. The colonists had built their settlement in a practical way. Metal prefab buildings arranged in neat rows with a central square for community gatherings. Solar panels and wind generators provided power while automated systems recycled air and water. The mining equipment was their most valuable technology, but even that was decades old and reliable rather than cutting edge. Children in the colony had more freedom than kids on established worlds. Parents let them wander the safe valleys around the settlement. The biggest dangers were getting lost or maybe falling into one of the shallow rivers that flowed down from the hills. No one worried about stranger danger or kidnapping in a community where everyone knew everyone. The friends spent their morning exploring a new cave system Do-hyun claimed to have found. It turned out to be just a shallow depression in the rocks, but they had fun pretending it was a secret base anyway. Jiwoo made up stories about ancient aliens who might have lived there millions of years ago. By midday, they were hungry and headed back toward the colony center. The adults were finishing their lunch break and getting ready to return to work. Minho's father waved from near the mining depot where the big machines were being prepared for the afternoon shift. The children bought sweet drinks from the automated vendor in the square and sat on the steps of the community center. From there they could see the whole settlement spread out before them, their parents moving purposefully toward their jobs. Delivery drones carrying supplies between buildings, everything normal and peaceful. Hyeji was telling them about a book she had read on her tablet about ancient Earth explorers when the sky started to change. At first it was just a shimmer like heat waves rising from hot rocks. Then dark shapes began to form against the orange afternoon sky of HFY. The first adults to notice pointed upward and called to their neighbors. Soon everyone in the settlement was looking at the 3 black ships descending toward their colony. The vessels were sleek and unfamiliar with surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Some of the colonists thought they might be traders arriving early or maybe officials from the Galactic Council making an unscheduled inspection. The ships certainly looked advanced enough to be government vessels. A few people even waved as the aircraft approached the landing area near the central square. The children watched with excitement as the mysterious ships touched down. Living on the frontier meant visitors were rare and always interesting. They hoped the newcomers might have news from Earth or stories from other worlds. But something felt wrong to Hyeji, even before the ship doors opened. The vessels had no visible markings or identification codes. Their landing approach had been too aggressive, too military. She grabbed Jiwoo's hand and started backing away from the square. The beings that emerged from the ships were like nothing the colonists had ever seen. Tall, insect-like creatures with hard black shells covering their bodies, 4 arms ending in sharp claws, eyes like dark mirrors that reflected no emotion or warmth. Their leader stood nearly 3 meters tall with decorative ridges along its head crest. It carried a device that projected its voice in clear human speech, though the words came out flat and mechanical. The creature announced that they were the Kythera Syndicate, and they had come to collect slaves. The peaceful afternoon of New Seoul colony ended in that moment. Parents screamed for their children while trying to reach them across the square. The aliens moved with frightening speed, stunning adults with energy weapons and binding them with glowing restraints. Hyeji pulled her 4 friends toward the old communications building at the edge of the settlement. Behind them they could hear plasma fire and human voices calling out in fear and pain. The mining equipment their parents operated every day was useless against advanced alien weapons. The 5 children ran as fast as they could while their world burned behind them. None of them understood yet what slavery meant, or why these creatures wanted to take humans away from their homes. All they knew was that the safe, peaceful life they had known was ending, and something terrible was beginning. As they reached the abandoned storage facility where Hyeji hoped they could hide, the children could see smoke rising from several buildings in the colony. The Kythera moved through the settlement like they had done this many times before on many other worlds. The hunt for New Seoul's children was about to begin. The storage facility had been empty for months since the mining company upgraded their equipment. Hyeji led her 4 friends through a gap in the back wall, where maintenance panels had been removed. Inside, they found themselves surrounded by dust-covered shelves and forgotten supplies. Emergency rations sat in sealed containers along one wall. A water recycling unit still functioned in the corner, making soft humming sounds. The building had basic life support systems that would keep them alive for several days if they stayed quiet and careful. Through the small windows, they could see Kythera hunting parties moving through the colony streets. The aliens carried scanning devices that swept back and forth as they searched each building. Their 4 arms moved independently as they worked, making them seem even more alien and frightening. Jiwoo had started crying quietly after seeing her parents dragged away in energy chains. The 7-year-old could not understand why the insect creatures wanted to hurt people who had never done anything wrong. Hyeji held her close and whispered that everything would be okay, even though she did not believe it herself. The twins Do-hyun and Do-young pressed against the window, trying to see what was happening to their neighbors. They watched as adults were loaded into containment pods that the Kythera had set up in the central square. Some of the humans fought back, but the alien weapons quickly stunned them into unconsciousness. Minho sat in the corner clutching his collection of colored rocks from the mines. The 8-year-old kept asking when their parents would come to find them. He did not understand that their parents were now prisoners, just like everyone else in the colony. On the 2nd day of hiding, their situation became desperate. Jiwoo developed a fever from stress and fear. She needed medicine, but the only medical supplies were in the colony clinic, which was now occupied by Kythera guards. The children had eaten most of their emergency rations and would soon run out of food. Minho made the decision that would doom him. Despite Hyeji's protests, he slipped out of the storage facility during the night to find medicine for his sick friend. The 8-year-old moved carefully through shadows between buildings, trying to avoid the alien patrol routes they had observed. The colony medical center still had power and automated systems. Minho managed to find fever-reducing medication in the supply cabinets. But as he prepared to return to his hiding friends, a Kythera hunter appeared in the doorway behind him. The alien moved faster than human eyes could follow. 4 arms seized the boy before he could even scream. The creature's claws were sharp enough to cut through metal, but it was careful not to damage its valuable prize. Humans in good condition brought higher prices in the slave markets. Minho's capture sent alerts through the Kythera communication network. The aliens now knew there were children hiding somewhere in the colony. They increased their search patterns and brought out more advanced scanning equipment designed to detect human life signs. The remaining 4 friends heard Minho's screams echoing through the empty streets. Jiwoo cried harder while the twins held on to each other in fear. Yeji tried to keep everyone calm, but inside she was terrified. She knew they would all be found eventually. Do-hyun was captured the next morning when he tried to reach the water treatment plant. Their supplies had run low and he thought he could refill their containers quickly. The Cathara had predicted this and set up an ambush near the facility. The 9-year-old fought bravely, but alien technology was too advanced for human strength to overcome. Do-young lasted only hours after his twin brother was taken. The remaining twin tried to rescue Do-hyun by following the Cathara patrol back to their processing center. Instead, he walked directly into another trap. The aliens had learned that human children would risk themselves to save their friends. Now only Hyeji and sick little Jiwoo remained hidden in the storage facility. The 10-year-old girl knew their situation was hopeless. The Cathara scanning devices were getting closer each hour. Soon they would detect the heat signatures of the last 2 children. But Hyeji had made a promise to protect her friends, and she would not break it even when facing alien monsters. She gathered the remaining supplies and led Jiwoo deeper into the storage facility. Maybe they could hide in the maintenance tunnels that connected to other buildings. The Cathara found them on the 3rd day. Thermal scanners detected their body heat through the metal walls of the storage building. When the aliens broke through the sealed entrance, Hyeji stood in front of Jiwoo with a piece of broken metal in her hands. The 10-year-old girl fought with everything she had. She bit and scratched and refused to surrender even when 4 alien arms held her down. The Cathara leader, Vex Prime, was impressed by her spirit. This one would make an excellent gladiator slave after proper training. Little Jiwoo was too sick and weak to fight. The 7-year-old could barely stand as alien claws lifted her toward the processing center. But her eyes burned with the same defiant fire that all humans carried deep in their hearts. The processing center had been built in the colony's main assembly hall. Cathara technicians worked efficiently to prepare their human cargo for transport. Adults hung unconscious in stasis pods while neural conditioning devices slowly broke down their resistance and free will. The 5 children were brought before Vex Prime, who explained their fate with casual cruelty. Human children were especially valuable because their minds were more flexible. They could be trained for specialized tasks that adult slaves were too set in their ways to perform. Minho would become a technical slave maintaining complex alien machinery. His curiosity about how things worked would serve his new masters well. The twins would be conditioned as entertainment slaves, forced to perform for the amusement of their owners. Their natural bond would make their suffering more interesting to watch. Jiwoo, with her imagination, would be trained as an artist slave, creating works to decorate alien palaces. Her creativity would be channeled into serving masters who cared nothing for human beauty or meaning. And Hyeji, with her leadership skills, would become a gladiator, fighting other slaves for the enjoyment of alien crowds. But the Cathara had made a terrible mistake. Their success beacon, broadcasting news of the raid to other slaving operations, also reached human communication networks. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, someone was listening. Someone who would not let children suffer while he drew breath. Top view. Execution was scheduled for the next day as a demonstration to break the remaining spirit of the adult prisoners. The Cathara wanted to show that resistance was hopeless. They had no idea that their message had awakened something far more dangerous than they could imagine. A storm was coming to Hambit 7, and it would have no mercy for those who harmed human children. 3 star systems away from the dying colony, Taewon wiped down glasses behind the bar of his establishment called the Broken Chain. The space station Crossroads orbited a dead world that served as a neutral meeting point for traders, smugglers, and other travelers who preferred to avoid official attention. To anyone watching, Taewon appeared to be just another aging bartender who had found his place serving drinks to the outcasts of civilized space. His customers included pirates who needed somewhere safe to spend their profits, and merchants who dealt in goods that governments preferred not to examine too closely. The Broken Chain had earned a reputation over 15 years as a place where information could be bought or sold and where dangerous people could drink in peace. Taewon had carefully built this image of himself as someone who asked no questions and caused no trouble for anyone with credits to spend. His bar served the best Korean soju in this sector of space, imported at great expense from Earth distilleries. He also kept stocks of alcoholic beverages from dozens of different worlds to satisfy the tastes of his diverse customers. But most people came for the atmosphere of safety and discretion. The establishment occupied a large space near the docking rings where ships came and went at all hours. Its main room had tables scattered around a central bar area, with private booths along the walls for customers who wanted more privacy. Soft lighting and quiet music created an environment where people could relax and forget their troubles. But Taewon had not always been a bartender, and the careful observer might notice things that did not fit his peaceful image. His hands bore bold scars that could only come from handling military-grade weapons. He moved with unconscious precision, always aware of every person and potential threat in his establishment. The way he cleaned glasses was too efficient, suggesting muscle memory from military training. When fights occasionally broke out in his bar, he ended them with techniques that were definitely not learned from bartending school. And sometimes late at night, when he thought no one was watching, the mask of friendly neutrality would slip, revealing something much harder underneath. 20 years earlier, Taewon had been Colonel Kim Taewon of the Human Special Operations Division, a military unit so classified that it officially did not exist. He had commanded the most dangerous missions during humanity's first expansion into hostile alien territory, clearing the way for colonists by eliminating threats that conventional forces could not handle. His unit had specialized in what the classified files called extreme prejudice operations against non-human hostiles. When alien forces threatened human colonies, or when diplomatic solutions failed, Taewon and his team were sent to solve problems permanently and quietly. The war against the hegemony had shaped him into something that barely resembled the young officer who had first volunteered for special operations. He had seen entire human settlements reduced to radioactive ash by alien weapons. He had held dying children while their parents' bodies cooled nearby and had sworn oaths of vengeance that he kept with mechanical precision. The things Taewon had done in response to those atrocities had earned him medals he never wore and commendations that were locked away in files most people would never see. Alien worlds had burned because of orders he gave and decisions he made. Enemy populations had learned to fear the simple presence of human forces in their systems. But victory in war came with a price that politicians and civilians rarely understood. Each mission had taken something from Taewon until he barely recognized the man he had once been. The nightmares never stopped, and the guilt over necessary actions never faded, no matter how justified they had been at the time. After the hegemony surrendered and peace treaties were signed, Taewon had quietly resigned from military service. He had seen too much and done too much to ever return to normal civilian life. The skills that made him an effective killer were not easily adapted to peaceful purposes. For years he had drifted from system to system, trying to find some way to live with the memories that haunted him. Alcohol helped numb the pain, but never made it disappear completely. Eventually, he had purchased the broken chain and settled into the routine of serving drinks to people who carried their own scars and secrets. The work was honest and simple in ways that military service had never been. No one died because of decisions he made behind the bar. No families were destroyed by operations he planned and executed. He could go to sleep each night knowing that his worst sin was overcharging for imported liquor. But some things could still wake the sleeping soldier that lived beneath the bartender's mask. The intercepted Kythera transmission that appeared on his private communications terminal was one of those things. As Taewon read the translated message about a successful slaving raid and the planned execution of human children, his hand stopped, shaking for the first time in 15 years. The beacon described 5 young humans who would be killed as an example to break the spirits of adult prisoners. Their names and ages were listed along with details about their capture and the entertainment value their deaths would provide for alien slavers. For 20 years, Taewon had tried to forget who he had been during the war. He had buried Colonel Kim Taewon so deeply that sometimes even he believed the bartender persona was real. But reading about children who would die while the galaxy looked away brought back memories that no amount of alcohol could suppress. He closed the broken chain that night and sent encrypted messages to 5 contacts whose communication codes he had memorized but never used. Old soldiers who, like him, had tried to leave the war behind and build new lives in the peace they had helped create. His message was simple and direct, conveying everything they needed to know in just a few words. The children need us. Are you? He did not expect all of them to respond positively. Military service ended, but the bonds forged in combat never truly disappeared. Within 6 hours, every member of his old team had sent back the same answer. They would come. They would fight. They would show the galaxy what happened to those who harmed human children. Taewon spent the rest of that night preparing weapons and equipment he had not touched in a decade. The bartender was gone, and in his place stood a soldier who had never learned how to accept defeat or abandon innocence to their fate. The war was over, but the warrior remained. The ship that Taewon brought out of deep storage was a masterpiece of human military engineering from the darkest days of the war. The stealth corvette Silent Justice had been his personal command during black operations designed to strike at enemy targets that conventional forces could never reach. Built in secret shipyards using technology that pushed the boundaries of human science, the vessel incorporated experimental cloaking systems that could bend light and sensor waves around its hull. Its weapons were designed for precision strikes that could level cities or eliminate single targets with equal effectiveness. Taewon had kept the ship maintained over the years, telling himself it was just a hobby for an old soldier who missed his glory days. But deep down, he had always known that someday he might need the Silent Justice again. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and peace treaties were just pieces of paper when children's lives were at stake. The asteroid base where his team assembled had once served as their forward operating post during the most intensive phase of the war. Hidden in a debris field between two dead systems, it remained invisible to civilian shipping and military patrols alike. Old automated defenses still functioned, protecting the facility from unwanted visitors. Commander Borum arrived first, piloting a transport fighter that still bore the faded markings of the 77th Reconnaissance Squadron. During the war, she had been their intelligence specialist, capable of infiltrating any enemy facility and extracting information through methods both subtle and direct. For 15 years since the war ended, Borum had worked as a freelance data broker, selling corporate secrets and government intelligence to the highest bidder. Her skills at gathering information and manipulating computer systems had made her wealthy, but she had never found the sense of purpose that military service had provided. Sergeant Major Gunwoo came next in a heavy assault shuttle that looked like it had been through several wars without proper maintenance. He had served as their demolitions expert and heavy weapons specialist, a man who could make bombs from spare parts or turn any battlefield to his advantage through superior firepower. Since leaving the military, Gunwoo had worked as a mining foreman on dangerous frontier worlds where his aggressive approach to problem-solving served him well. But he had grown bored with civilian life, and the chance to use his skills for something that mattered again was impossible to resist. The last two members of the old team arrived together, sharing transport costs like they had learned to do during their years running a small medical clinic. Dr. Suman had been their medic and biological warfare specialist, someone who could heal or kill with equal expertise depending on what the mission required. Captain Jinwoo had served as their pilot and mechanical expert, the man who could fly anything with engines and repair any piece of technology, no matter how badly damaged. Both had spent the peace years treating spacers and colonists on the frontier who could not afford proper medical care in the core systems. As the 5 soldiers reunited, in the asteroid base's briefing room, the years seemed to fall away like discarded clothing. They moved with the same unconscious coordination that had made them legendary during the war. Each knew what the others were thinking before words were spoken. Taewon spread the intelligence data across the holographic display showing satellite images of the Kythera positions on Hanbit 7. The alien force consisted of 3 heavy cruisers in orbit and approximately 200 ground troops occupying the human colony. The situation was desperate, but not impossible for soldiers who had built their careers on achieving the impossible. Standard military doctrine would require a full battle fleet to assault such a well-defended position. But Taewon's team had never followed standard procedures or accepted conventional limitations. Dr. Suman had spent the journey to the asteroid base analyzing Kythera physiology using data stolen from Galactic Council xenobiology databases. She had identified several critical weaknesses that the alien species tried to hide from potential enemies, including vulnerability to specific chemical compounds. Captain Jinwoo had studied the enemy ship designs and found fatal flaws in their defensive systems. The Kythera had built their vessels for intimidation and overwhelming firepower against primitive opponents. They had never faced human military technology designed during total war. Commander Boram provided the most crucial intelligence through her network of underworld contacts. She had learned details about Kythera slave processing methods, including the timeline for neural conditioning. The 5 children were still alive, but they had less than 48 hours before irreversible brain damage occurred. The plan they developed was audacious even by the standards of soldiers who had spent their careers attempting the impossible. They would use the Silent Justice's cloaking capabilities to infiltrate the system undetected and eliminate the orbital defenses through surgical strikes. Once space superiority was established, they would assault the colony directly to rescue the children and eliminate every Kythera on the planet. But this would not be a standard rescue mission with rules of engagement and concern for enemy casualties. The aliens had crossed a line that could never be forgiven by harming human children. They had chosen to make war on innocents who posed no threat to anyone. Such behavior required a response that would serve as an example to other potential slavers throughout the galaxy. As Taewon looked at his assembled team, he felt the familiar weight of command settling onto his shoulders. These soldiers had followed him through hell during the war and were ready to do so again. They trusted his judgment and his ability to bring them home alive after completing the mission. But this operation would be different from their wartime missions in one crucial way. During the war, they had fought to protect human civilization from alien conquest. Now they fought to protect something even more precious, the innocence of 5 children who represented the future of their species. He spoke the words that would define their mission and echo through history as an example of human determination. We are not just saving those children, we are sending a message to every slaver in the galaxy. Humanity is not prey. Touch our young and face extinction. The team spent 18 hours preparing weapons and equipment, while the Silent Justice's automated systems performed final maintenance checks. Each soldier worked with the quiet efficiency that came from years of experience in operations, where failure meant death for everyone involved. When they finished their preparations, the asteroid base fell silent as its occupants boarded the stealth corvette for what might be their final mission. 5 aging soldiers were about to remind the galaxy why humanity had emerged victorious from every war they had ever fought. The hunt for the Kythera was about to begin. The Silent Justice approached Hanbit 7 like death itself, moving through the void between worlds invisible to every sensor the Kythera possessed. Taewon had spent 3 days studying the alien patrol patterns, learning how their crews moved their ships and where their defenses were strongest and weakest. The enemy formation showed the overconfidence typical of slavers who rarely faced serious resistance. The 3 Kythera cruisers maintained loose positions around the planet, prioritizing intimidation over tactical soundness. Their crews had grown lazy from years of attacking helpless colonies. Captain Jinwoo guided the human ship through the asteroid field that surrounded Hanbit 7, using gravitational shadows and debris clouds to mask their approach. The Silent Justice's cloaking field bent light around its hull while sensor dampeners made it invisible to electronic detection. The first Kythera cruiser died before its crew realized they were under attack. A spread of quantum torpedoes launched from the human ship found the precise weak points Dr. Suman had identified in the alien vessel's structure. The massive warship broke apart in seconds as its own power core imploded. Emergency alarms screamed through the second Kythera cruiser as its captain tried to understand what had destroyed his companion vessel. But Commander Boram had already infiltrated their communication systems, feeding false sensor data, while simultaneously mapping their internal layouts for the assault teams. Sergeant Major Gunwoo's assault pods launched from the Silent Justice and bypassed the alien ship's external defenses entirely. The pods breached the hull at critical points identified by Boram's intelligence, allowing armed humans to pour into the enemy vessel's most vulnerable areas. The Kythera warriors fought bravely, but they were facing opponents who had refined the art of ship-to-ship combat during humanity's most desperate war. Gunwoo's assault teams moved through the alien cruiser like forces of nature, cutting through enemy defenses with weapons designed to kill efficiently. Advanced human armor shrugged off Cathera plasma fire while returning shots that could penetrate any protection the aliens possessed. The invaders had trained for this type of close-quarters combat in environments where failure meant death for their entire species. The battle inside the second cruiser lasted exactly 12 minutes. When the shooting stopped, every Cathera aboard was dead, and Gunwoo's teams had secured the ship's critical systems. The vessel would serve as a forward base for the ground assault that was to follow. The third Cathera cruiser's captain showed wisdom by attempting to flee toward the planet's defensive grid. But the Silent Justice had been designed to hunt ships much faster than anything the aliens could build. Taewon personally took the helm for the pursuit. His fingers danced across control surfaces he had not touched in years, as muscle memory returned from countless battles fought in the darkness between stars. The fleeing alien ship managed to get within range of the planetary defenses before Jinwoo's precision fire crippled its engines. On the surface of Hanbit 7, the Cathera ground forces had heard the sounds of battle in orbit through their communication networks. Vex Prime ordered the immediate execution of the human children, hoping to complete at least part of his mission before whatever was coming reached the surface. But he had underestimated both the speed and determination of his enemies. As Cathera guards moved toward the holding cells where the 5 children waited in terror, the colony's power grid suddenly failed, plunging everything into darkness. Dr. Suman had developed a biological agent specifically tailored to Cathera physiology. During the journey to Hanbit 7, released into the colony's air recycling system, the compound caused temporary paralysis in the alien species, while leaving human biology completely unaffected. As Cathera warriors collapsed throughout the facility, Taewon's team moved through the settlement like ghosts in the darkness. Their night vision equipment and advanced sensors allowed them to see clearly, while their enemies stumbled blind and helpless. The rescue of the 5 children took less than 10 minutes. Minho, Jiwoo, Hyeji Do-hyun, and Do-young were found in their cells, traumatized but alive. Dr. Suman quickly examined each child and administered medications to help them recover from their ordeal. But the real work began after the children were secure. Vex Prime and his surviving followers found themselves facing a choice between surrender and trial, or resistance and extinction. The Cathera leader chose to fight, believing his remaining forces could overwhelm 5 aging humans. It was the last mistake he would ever make. When the battle began, Taewon's team demonstrated why they had been legends during the war. They moved with mechanical precision, eliminating enemies with shots that never missed, and tactics that gave their opponents no chance to respond effectively. Gunwoo's heavy weapons turned Cathera defensive positions into smoking craters. Borams, electronic warfare systems, blinded enemy sensors while feeding false information to their commanders. Jinwoo coordinated airstrikes from captured alien vessels that rained destruction on any organized resistance. Dr. Suman's biological weapons caused enemy reinforcements to collapse before they could reach the battle zones, and Taewon himself moved through the combat area like an angel of death, striking down alien commanders with weapons that had been designed to kill efficiently and without mercy. The Cathera had shown no mercy to human children, and they would receive none in return. Every alien on the planet was marked for death as payment for their crimes against innocents. This was not war. It was extermination carried out with surgical precision. Vex Prime made his final stand in the colony's central square, surrounded by the bodies of his fallen warriors. He activated a personal force field and raised weapons taken from his ship, hoping to take at least 1 human with him when he died. Taewon approached the alien leader alone, carrying a rifle that had served him through dozens of battles during the war. His face showed no emotion as he looked at the creature that had terrorized children and planned to sell them into slavery for profit. The force field meant nothing to weapons designed to penetrate heavy armor. Vex Prime's death was quick and efficient, but not painless. The alien leader had time to understand that he faced something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined before darkness claimed him forever. When the shooting stopped, the only sounds On Hanbit 7 were the cries of rescued human colonists and the gentle voices of soldiers comforting traumatized children. The Cathara Syndicate no longer existed and would never threaten anyone again. The message had been sent. The price had been paid. And 5 young humans were going home. The liberation of New Sol Colony became legend within months, spreading through the galaxy's communication networks, carried by traders, spacers, and the few Cathara who had been elsewhere when their syndicate was destroyed. The story grew with each telling, but the core truth remained unchanged. Humanity had demonstrated that it would travel across the stars and fight impossible odds to protect its young. 5 aging soldiers had destroyed an entire alien slaving operation to save 5 children. The implications of this action rippled through every sector where intelligent species gathered and conducted business. The 5 rescued children were transported to Earth aboard the Silent Justice for medical treatment and psychological counseling. Minhyo, Jiwoo, Hyeji, Dohyun, and Doyoung had been traumatized by their experience, but their spirits remained unbroken. Human resilience and proper care would heal the wounds left by their ordeal. Dr. Sumin personally oversaw their recovery, working with the best specialists Earth could provide. The children had nightmares and moments of fear, but they also carried with them the knowledge that when humanity's young were threatened, warriors would emerge from the darkness to stand against any enemy. Minho returned to his fascination with rocks and minerals, but now he also studied military history, reading about the soldiers who had saved him. Jiwoo channeled her imagination into writing stories about brave humans who protected innocent people throughout the galaxy. The twins Dohyun and Doyoung became inseparable in new ways, their shared experience creating bonds that would last their entire lives. And Hyeji, who had tried so hard to protect her friends, decided she would become a soldier herself when she grew up. The surviving colonists of New Sol made a choice that surprised many observers. Rather than abandon the world where they had suffered so much, they decided to rebuild their settlement stronger than before. They erected a memorial in the center of their community, listing the names of those who had died in the raid. But they also built something else that would change the future of human expansion. A beacon was installed that would instantly alert Earth's military forces to any future threats. The Outer Rim colonies would never again face such dangers alone, while help existed anywhere in human space. The beacon system became a model copied by hundreds of other frontier settlements. Within 5 years, a network of warning devices connected every human colony to rapid response forces. Pirates and slavers found it much harder to operate when their attacks triggered immediate military retaliation. For the Galactic community, the destruction of the Cathara Syndicate served as a harsh lesson about humanity's true nature. The species that had emerged from a single world to claim their place among the stars was not the collection of peaceful traders and explorers they appeared to be. Beneath the surface of human civilization lay something far more dangerous than most aliens had imagined. These humans who smiled and made jokes and seemed so friendly had earned their place in the galaxy through victory in wars that left entire enemy species extinct or scattered. The story of 5 soldiers destroying a slaving operation spread to every civilized world. Alien governments quietly updated their intelligence files on human military capabilities. Trade negotiations suddenly became more polite and respectful when humans were involved. Slave raids on human settlements dropped to 0 within a year of the New Sol incident. Pirates began avoiding systems, with human populations finding easier targets elsewhere. Even the most aggressive alien species found reasons to resolve disputes through negotiation rather than violence. The psychological impact was as important as the military demonstration. Other species realized that humans would not simply accept losses and move on like most civilized races. They would remember every injury and respond with overwhelming force when their core values were threatened. Children represented humanity's future, and attacks on the young would bring retaliation that ignored all concepts of proportional response. The Cathara had killed human children, so their entire organization was eliminated. The message was clear and unmistakable. Tae-won returned to his bar on Crossroads Station, resuming his role as a simple bartender who served drinks and listened to stories. The broken chain reopened to the same clientele as before, though some patrons noticed changes in their host. The man behind the bar seemed more relaxed than he had been in years. The constant tension that had marked his movements was gone, replaced by the calm confidence of someone who had found peace with his past. The nightmares that had plagued him since the war finally ended. His hands no longer shook when he poured drinks. His sleep was no longer interrupted by memories of things he had done during humanity's darkest conflicts. He had found a way to use his skills for something that mattered without compromising his principles or harming innocence. The other members of his team scattered again to their civilian lives, but they maintained contact now in ways they had not before. They had rediscovered their sense of purpose, and the knowledge that their experience and abilities could serve something greater than personal peace. Commander Borum returned to her work as a data broker, but now she also monitored galactic communications for signs of threats to human settlements. Her network of contacts had expanded to include sources who would warn her of potential dangers. Sergeant Major Gunwu went back to his mining operations, but he also began training civilian defense forces on frontier worlds. His aggressive approach to problem-solving now served to prepare colonists for potential attacks. Dr. Suman and Captain Jinwoo continued running their medical clinic, but they also established training programs for emergency response teams. Their experience in combat medicine and evacuation procedures proved invaluable for dangerous frontier conditions. The memorial service for the Kithara Syndicate was attended by representatives from across the galaxy, not to mourn the slavers, but to witness humanity's promise delivered by Ambassador Chen, whose words were broadcast to every inhabited system. She spoke for the human delegation, standing before an audience that included former enemies and uncertain allies. Her message was simple and direct, carrying the authority of a species that had proven its willingness to back words with action. "We are a peaceful species," she said, looking directly at the assembled alien representatives. "We seek trade, cooperation, and mutual understanding with all sentient life. We prefer negotiation to violence and friendship to conflict wherever possible. But harm our children, threaten our families, and you will discover why we emerged victorious from every war we have ever fought. We do not seek conquest or domination, but we will accept nothing less than absolute victory in defense of our own." The silence that followed her words lasted for nearly a minute, as the implications sank in. Humanity was offering friendship and cooperation, but also promising terrible consequences for those who chose to become enemies. The message was received and understood by every species represented at the gathering. In the months and years that followed, humanity's colonies flourished under the protection of a reputation earned through blood and fire. Children played safely in streets on 1,000 worlds, their laughter a testament to the price their species was willing to pay for their security. Parents worked without fear, knowing that any threat to their families would bring swift and overwhelming retaliation. And in a quiet bar on a trade station between the stars, an aging bartender continued to serve drinks and tell stories. But now, when the galaxy looked at humanity, they saw not just traders and explorers, but guardians of something precious and irreplaceable. The lesson had been taught with surgical precision. The message had been sent in terms that no one could misunderstand. Humanity's children would never again face the darkness alone, because somewhere in that darkness, soldiers waited to answer their call. The war was over, but the watch continued. And every alien who had ever considered humans as potential prey now understood the truth that the Kithara had learned too late. Humanity was not the hunted. They were the hunters. And they had no mercy for those who threatened their young.